This episode of Forging Friendships is sponsored in part by Iron Mountain Metalcraft, located in the beautiful Pigeon Forge, Tennessee area. Go forge a memory with Forged in Fire fan favorite Robbie Bowman. Woo! The show is also sponsored in part by African Custom Knives, Black Dragon Forge, Paragon Kilns, and with the support of viewers like you through our GoFundMe campaign, link in description. Welcome to the heart of Texas. We are in the middle of nowhere, Texas, Maynard, Texas, outside of Austin today. We are having some fun checking out a good friend of mine, Heart of Texas Metalworks, Lee. Checking out his shop. Man, this is cool. Living the dream, y'all. Had the opportunity to meet Lee about a year ago at Blade Show. Just happened, we're at the after party. Guy comes in, I'm sitting there, introduced, just start talking, figure out, hey, I'm from Texas too. Great guy, awesome place. So we're checking out his store today. Go knock on the door and see if he's here yet.
Hi, my name is Lee Lanford. I am the owner, operator, blacksmith, machinist, founder, all that sort of stuff of Heart of Texas Metalworks. My shop's here in Maynard, Texas, just outside of Austin. From Austin originally, been here pretty much all my life. My shop is actually sitting on family property that we've had in the family for close to 100 years. I built my shop here going on 12 years ago. I've been doing this now professionally for close to 20 years. Actually, longer than 20 years. I've been doing it for closer to 25 years now. So this is kind of the forging area over here. The 375-pound Colombian anvil that I picked up years and years ago. The story of my grandfather or my uncle or somebody's got an anvil in the barn. Took it with a grain of salt. Yeah, okay, whatever. And so my grandfather used to collect old cast iron implement seats. He went to the same antique shop and he said, hey, by the way, Ken told me to let you know that they have this anvil that his uncle has and they want to see if you want to buy it. What is it? And I was living in Florida at the time. That's when I was working out there. Richard Postman had just come out with his Anvils in America book. And I went and looked at he started describing it and I'm like, that anvil shouldn't be here. And I told my grandma, I said, the anvil shouldn't be here. And he's like, what do you mean? I said, that anvil was made for export. It was made for export to go to Europe. It's a European style anvil. This guy had been using the anvil as a tractor weight for 40 years. Been on the front of his tractor for 40 years. Had hardly ever been used. And I picked it up sight unseen. I paid for it. I never laid an eye on it before paying for it. Yeah, I got lucky to get that one. Born in the military. My father was in the military. I was born in Fort Lee, Virginia, but my family is from Texas, and we moved to San Antonio when I was about 6 months old. Lived there until I was about 3 and moved to Austin, and I've been here pretty much ever since, other than traveling around working. I went to school, into high school at Austin High, Stephen F. Austin High School. Grew up learning how to drive out here in the country, learning how to work on machinery. My family had a business that's no longer in business, but we had a farm and industrial equipment business here in the Austin area for close to 70 years, selling tractors and equipment for farm and industrial use. So I grew up in a shop learning how to work with equipment and kind of knowing how to weld, just sticking some stuff together. My grandfather taught me a lot of things, just how to do some stuff. So I've always had a very keen interest in just being able to do things with my hands, and I was in a lot of ways almost forced by my dad, my grandfather, to learn how to do things for myself. It was one thing to be shown how to do something, but to continue on, you had to do it for yourself. And so that's how I've always learned to do things and how I approach things. I'm a kind of an auction junkie and find equipment. I try to find it as cheaply as I can, even if it needs work. And I can usually fix it back up and get it to, that's how I found the hammer, my Nazel hammer. Stumbled across that guy and contacted him, and we worked out a deal. And if people knew what I paid for that hammer, they would be very upset. Even though they were more or less mass produced, they're still hand done. I think they started that model in 1912 and mine was built in 1915. But probably my biggest pride and joy is the Nazel 3B. Built in August of 1915. This is actually one of the earlier models. It's number 121, if I recall correctly. Picked this up out of Brooklyn, New York, from a sculptor up there who had it in his shop, and he decided he didn't want it any longer. I mean, I can tell you a funny story about the foundation for the hammer. We poured a separate pad for it to isolate it from the rest of the building a little bit better than just tying it in directly to the foundation. And it's actually on its own pier. My concrete guy came by about 3 o'clock on a Friday and said, okay, well, we'll be here at 6 in the morning. And I'm like, for what? He goes, yeah, we're gonna go ahead and pour the foundation for the hammer. I'm like, okay, I didn't know anything about this, but okay, great. I didn't have any, we had the steel in it, but I didn't have any of the location point, the mounting, the bolting pattern laid in. I was in here well into the wee hours getting those things, and I literally have an original blueprint for the foundation, and it's trying to get it laid out and onto their the rebar and everything, and get everything mounted up so that it can be put in. Long and short of it is I was within a 1/16 of an inch truly on spot. So I mean, I was, even under the pressure, it's like, okay, I took, made sure to take the time because I knew I only had one shot at that. Got it refurbished, and when I built this shop, had a definite place to put it. Happy to put it back to work. So here it is, over 100 years old, still working. So yeah, after I graduated high school, I went off to university, was going to Texas A&M. My major at the time was biology, and my plan was to focus on bioengineering and going into genetic research. I had a real passion for biology throughout high school, to the point where my biology teacher in high school got me an apprenticeship at the MD Anderson Research Center in Bastrop. So I worked out there for a summer, working with some of their research scientists and just learning how to work in a lab and do things like that. Teaches you a lot about PPE and virology and stuff like that that's kind of relevant nowadays. So I went off to university and did that for a couple of years, and then kind of, for all intents and purposes, woke up one morning and decided I really didn't want to do that anymore. I think part of it was I was not doing as much physically and with my hands as I would care to. And then over here I've got a 1928 Little Giant 25-pounder. Had some damage when I found it. Found it in a barn locally, actually, just a few miles from here. So I had to send it off to Sid Sudermeyer, and he cut the sow block or cut the anvil and put a new sow block on it. That was my first power hammer. But I love to collect old machines and restore them back to functionality and usefulness. No sense getting rid of old iron like that. I was not a great student in high school. In college, university, I was a better student. I mean, I was more motivated too, but once I've made the decision mentally that was not the path that I wanted to continue, I kind of slacked off a little bit, if you will. So, towards the end, my grades were slipping. So I just took a break from school. Was working here in town. I worked at one point, poor, starving young kid, working 3 jobs. I was a bouncer for a good time down on 6th Street in Austin. Did that for several years. It's fun. It has its advantages for things. 1912 Zayn Hahnemann friction press over here that I picked up at an auction about a year ago. It was in pieces. Nobody knew what it was. I got it for, I don't know, $100. Just basically a massive motorized screw press, and it came with a bevy of old jewelers dies and things like that are really interesting. I'm hoping to incorporate that into some work later on. Went back to Austin Community College. Took a sculpture class doing clay sculpture, and the next semester ACC had started offering some metal courses, and they offered a metal sculpture class. And I thought to myself, well, shoot, I know how to weld. I could stick, or let's put it this way, I thought I knew how to weld. I could stick some metal together, let's put it that way. And that semester, that was actually the first semester that ACC had just started an art metals program, which included blacksmithing, welding, and it was actually a technical degree at the time. So I actually learned metallurgy, technical welding, layout and fabrication going into this program. I ended up being the first person to graduate from Austin Community College with an art metals degree. heat treating furnaces that I use. They're usually, these were probably used for like a dentist's office and burning out some of the molds and everything for dentures, but they work great for heat treating and stuff like that. And if you can find them at an auction or a garage sale, you can use, I mean, I think I got both of them for like $25. One of the forges, this is probably one of the newest additions to the shop. Got a coal iron 25-ton forge press. Real happy to get it. We've already used it for a couple little jobs. Made some leaves for a little sculptural project. These are out of aluminum, 1/4-inch aluminum. Then we cut the shape on the water jet and then make a die to vein it, and comes out really nicely. You know, handy to have. I still love my screw presses, my fly presses, but it's nice to have power behind some things sometimes. You see a lot of my auction finds just kind of laying around. I buy and sell equipment where I can. If I can buy it cheap and sell it for more, then, you know, it's another way of making. Why not? It's a way of making some money. I ended up going to the Abana conference in Asheville, and I think that was in I don't remember if it was 96 or 98. Abana, which is the Artist Blacksmiths Association of North America, had just started a program where they were creating what they called a journeyman program. And what they did is they created a forum where shop owners and people that were looking for work as journeymen basically could get together and you know, I could get hired onto a shop. I saw that as an opportunity. I was the first person to jump on that and ended up traveling around the country for about 4 or 5 years working at different shops as a journeyman blacksmith. So I ended up getting a blacksmithing degree essentially from ACC, but I got real world experience and application of that working as a journeyman for different architectural shops. We were doing architectural blacksmithing. These are some of the grinders. One of the grinders that I build for knife makers. We cut the parts out on the water jet and then machine them to make a really nice adjustable grinder. So you can really use, you know, a different variety of belts and things like that. Adjust the tension. So it's got a lot of variability as far as tensioning goes. Try to make them all out of American parts. Use a Westinghouse motor, the Genesis very VFD, but you can see a couple of the frames. I just sold another one yesterday, so got to put these together in my control chaos of an assembly area. But yeah, I'm hoping to really start taking more of these to market here pretty soon. Got a design for a tilting version that goes to 90 degrees and for a horizontal grinder, so I'll probably get that into production here pretty quickly. Biggest thing right now, especially during this time, is just the back order of parts. Everybody's tied up with the COVID stuff, so just trying to get parts for, you know, my wheels. I don't make my wheels yet. I'm looking to start probably making my own wheels here before too long. Get a CNC lathe and start making my own. And we make, like here's a bucket stand. We make, so you can put a bucket in here. We make the stands for the grinders, so it can be either pedestal mount with a couple of tool holders or bench mount. Over here is my little chem lab for doing the finishes on some of our knuckles. Oh yeah, we can go talk about knuckles.
I thought he was making meth.
Round about 2002 was back in Texas. I had met my soon-to-be wife, decided, you know, I was gonna kind of more or less strike out on my own, so to speak. I'd already been doing side jobs. I guess around 2005, the bottom kind of fell out of the tech industry, and I got let laid off. I had been doing enough side work at that point when I could. I told my wife, you know, I'm gonna kind of strike out on my own. And the funny thing is literally the day that I got let go was the day that I found out that my wife was pregnant. Struck out on my own at that point, and I was working out of a building that my dad had on his place, just kind of an old garage building. I mean, it was pretty. I was working probably in a 20-foot square area. About 2007, was just kind of looking at things and really decided that, you know, I'm not playing anymore. What are other avenues of revenue, basically? Was familiar with water jet cutting. I'd had several jobs that I needed water jet cutting done. Here in the Austin area at the time, there was just really a couple of folks that were available to do it. So I started looking at incorporating a water jet into the business model, into the business plan. I will say this, it is not a light decision. They are not inexpensive machines. You know, I had done my research. The Austin market at the time was ripe for that type of expansion. There was really not much competition, And so I built this facility. It's a 5,000 square foot shop, and I bought a water jet at the same time. January of 2008, basically, I opened my doors in this facility. Fall of 2008 is when the economy took a real dive, and I will say, had it not been for the fact that I had the water jet, I wouldn't have survived. And it was funny at the time when I was mentioning all this. My grandfather and I were very, very close. When I talked to him about getting the water jet, and he kind of looked and he said, well, if you don't stick your neck out, you can't get it chopped off. I still think about him saying that. I still it's one of those kind of times and moments in history that kind of burned into my mind, and that you have to take some risks at times to get where you are, because if you don't take those risks, you're not going to get anywhere.